Cold concrete pressed into my spine as the night hummed around me, the porch light flickering like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. My hands felt heavy, distant, as if they belonged to someone else, and the taste of metal lingered at the back of my throat. I remember thinking how quiet everything had become, how trust can drain out of a room without making a sound. If you're listening to this and you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Stories like this don't announce themselves until it's almost too late. The air smelled like rain and old wood, and my thoughts kept slipping away from me in pieces. I tried to hold on to the ordinary details, the steps, the door, the glass, anything that would keep me anchored. What frightened me most wasn't the darkness, but the certainty settling in that the danger was familiar. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I was lying on cold gravel, staring at a slice of night sky that felt too wide and too empty. My body would not listen to me. Every breath scraped, shallow and wrong, and the ground pressed into my cheek like it was trying to pull me under. Somewhere nearby, an engine sound faded, leaving only wind and the low buzz of insects. I remember thinking how quiet the world can get when something inside you breaks. Fear came in waves, not loud, but heavy. My hands tingled, useless, my thoughts slipping in and out like a bad signal. I kept trying to understand what had gone wrong, replaying the last moments, searching for a mistake I could fix. Then it landed. This was not an accident. I had not been unlucky. I had been betrayed. The realization hurt more than my body. The person who left me here was someone I trusted with my life, someone I believed would protect me. As the darkness closed in, one question echoed louder than fear. How could trust turn into danger here? I thought I was safe because my marriage felt quiet, not perfect, not exciting, but steady in a way I had come to value. He was the person I came home to after long days when my energy was gone and my patience thin. We shared routines more than dreams, and at the time, that felt like enough. What anchored me was not romance. It was reliability. The way he showed up at the same times, remembered small details, handled practical things when my mind was crowded. I trusted him because he seemed consistent, and consistency felt like care. After years of building a life that demanded everything from me, that steadiness felt like rest. There were nights we sat in the same room doing separate things, comfortable in silence. I told myself that was intimacy maturing, not distance growing. I was tired in a way sleep never fixed, lonely in a way success never touched. Having someone beside me, even quietly, felt like proof I was not alone. I leaned on him emotionally without realizing how much. I let myself believe that being understood was less important than being supported. He knew my habits, my stress, my weaknesses, and I took that familiarity as safety. Trust grew slowly, reasonably, built from shared mornings and uneventful evenings. Looking back, I understand how easy it is to mistake calm for protection. At the time, I believed the life I had built could finally rest before him. Though, there was a version of me who stood entirely on her own, then alone. Before I ever met him, my life was already full, not flashy, not easy, but built with intention. I worked long hours because I believed stability was something you earned, not something that arrived by luck. Every decision I made was about durability, about creating a life that could hold up under pressure. I learned early how to rely on myself. When problems came up, I solved them. When plans failed, I adjusted. There was no safety net waiting if I misstepped, so I learned to think ahead, to protect what I built. That discipline shaped everything, From how I ran my work days to how I handled money and responsibility. Success, for me, was quiet. It looked like consistency, paying people fairly, honoring commitments, and sleeping at night knowing things were handled. I trusted systems more than promises and preparation more than hope. That mindset carried into every part of my life. Protecting my assets was never about distrust. It was about respect for the years it took to build them. I knew how quickly one bad decision could undo progress, and I was determined not to let that happen. By the time he entered my life, I was steady, confident, and self-sufficient. I did not need saving. What I wanted was partnership. What I did not notice yet were the small shifts, the quiet changes that would test everything I believed about control and trust in my own mind. I did not notice the change all at once. It arrived quietly, in pauses that lingered a little too long and answers that felt thinner than before. He was still there, still present in the practical ways. But something between us had gone still, like air before a storm. He spoke less about himself. When I asked how he was doing, the responses felt rehearsed, surface level, as if depth had been set aside. I told myself he was tired. I knew my work consumed space, and it felt easier to believe I was the reason for the distance. Silence became normal. Evenings passed with us sitting near each other, but not truly together. I learned to fill the gaps with explanations that protected the image I had of us. I convinced myself that comfort did not need conversation, that trust did not require constant reassurance. There were moments when his attention sharpened suddenly, when he watched me with an intensity I could not place. I brushed that off too, calling it concern, calling it care. Looking back, it was unfamiliar. But at the time, unfamiliar did not mean dangerous. I had invested so much belief in who I thought he was that doubt felt like betrayal on my part. Questioning him felt disloyal, even unreasonable. It was easier to assume I was missing something than to accept that something might be missing in him. Trust. I learned too late, can narrow your vision. And just when my unease began to surface, he reached for closeness again that felt briefly reassuring. I remember the night he suggested dinner because it felt like a turning point. Not dramatic, just unexpected. After weeks of quiet distance, he reached for connection, and I felt myself soften immediately. I chose my clothes more carefully than usual, not out of vanity, but hope. The restaurant was familiar, comfortable, the kind of place where time slows and conversation feels easier. Sitting across from him, I noticed how attentive he seemed, how his focus returned to me. It felt like being seen again. I let myself relax. I told myself this was what reconnection looked like, subtle and unforced. The warmth of the room, the low hum of other voices, the steady rhythm of the evening all worked together to calm the questions I had been holding. I remember thinking how fragile relief can be, and how desperately we want to believe in it. When the drink arrived, I lifted the glass without hesitation. It tasted ordinary, familiar. Nothing about the moment felt dangerous. If anything, it felt earned, like a reward for patience. I took a sip and leaned back, breathing easier than I had in weeks, unaware that this calm was only borrowed, and that my body was about to tell me a truth my heart was not ready to face. In that pause, I trusted the moment completely, believing safety had quietly returned to me. I noticed it first as a heaviness, subtle and easy to dismiss. My head felt thick, like thoughts were moving through syrup. I blamed the long day, the wine, the relief of finally sitting still. I told myself to breathe and let it pass, but it didn't pass. The room began to tilt, not dramatically, just enough to make me reach for the edge of the table. My fingers missed where I expected the surface to be. That startled me more than the dizziness. My body was no longer matching my intentions. I tried to stand and felt my legs hesitate, as if they needed permission to move. A wave of warmth flushed through me, followed by a chill that crept up my spine. I remember focusing hard on staying composed, on not embarrassing myself, on trusting that he would notice and help. He guided me gently, and I leaned into that guidance without question. Trust made everything slower, softer. Fear lagged behind sensation. I kept searching for a reasonable explanation, repeating that this was exhaustion, stress, anything but danger. As we moved outside, the air felt sharper, lights brighter, sounds stretched thin. The world was changing faster than I could adjust. Familiar streets blurred, turns felt wrong, and a quiet alarm finally began to sound inside me. Something was off, not just in my body, but in the direction we were going, and for the first time that night, denial started to lose its grip, even as I still hoped this feeling would fade on its own soon enough. I knew something was wrong when the road changed. Pavement gave way to gravel, lights disappeared, and the familiar rhythm of the city fell silent. My mind finally caught up to my body. This was not a shortcut. This was a choice. Denial collapsed all at once. Every small moment I had excused lined up with terrible clarity. The silence, the distance, the careful calm. Trust didn't fade. It snapped. I felt it break inside my chest, sharp and clean like glass. I searched his posture, his stillness, the way he kept driving without hesitation. There was no urgency to help me, only control. The realization landed without noise. The danger wasn't around us, it was beside me. Fear hardened into something colder. Anger tried to rise, but betrayal weighed more. I understood then that love had been replaced by calculation, that the safety I believed in had been borrowed and was now withdrawn. I did not need words to know the truth. My body was failing, and the person I trusted most was allowing it. In that moment, the future I imagined vanished. What remained was certainty. Nothing would be the same after this. I was no longer confused. I was no longer unsure. I was being taken somewhere to be left, and he decided I would not matter. I knew he was gone when the engine sound faded and did not return. The silence after that felt enormous, pressing in from every side. I was alone, too weak to stand, too disoriented to call out in any way that mattered. The ground was cold beneath me. Gravel bit into my skin each time I tried to shift, and even that small movement drained what little strength I had left. My thoughts broke apart, drifting between memories and unfinished plans. I thought about work I had not returned to, decisions I had not made, pieces of myself I still believed in. Time stretched strangely. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes like something endless. I focused on breathing, counting it quietly, afraid that if I stopped paying attention, my body might forget how. The darkness felt deliberate, like it was helping erase me. What hurt most was not the pain, but the understanding that this was intentional. I had been placed here to disappear, without witnesses, without explanation. Trust did not just fail me, it abandoned me completely. Just as my thoughts began to blur into nothing, a distant sound cut through the stillness. Low, steady, approaching, and impossible to ignore. I heard the sound again, closer this time, steady and real. Headlights cut through the trees, sweeping over the ground until they found me. I tried to move, failed, and let my eyes stay open instead. Footsteps approached, quick but controlled. A shape knelt beside me, blocking the wind, hands firm and careful. I remember the weight of a jacket settling over my shoulders and the relief of warmth returning to places that had gone numb. The person spoke calmly, not rushed, not panicked, and that calm reached me before understanding did. I drifted in and out, aware of being lifted, supported, placed somewhere safe. The smell of clean fabric, the click of a seatbelt, the vibration of an engine starting. Each detail anchored me, proof that I was no longer invisible. Trust returned in fragments, not the blind trust I had lost, but something smaller and instinctive. This person checked my breathing, kept me focused, stayed present. I let myself lean into that steadiness because my body had nothing left to offer. As the road smoothed beneath us, I felt the first fragile shift from fear to possibility. I did not know who had found me or why they stopped. I only knew that for the first time since the darkness closed in, survival felt possible again there. I woke to white light and the steady pulse of machines. My mouth tasted sharp and dry, my limbs heavy but present. For a moment I thought I had dreamed the road, the darkness, the hands lifting me. Then memory returned in pieces, slow and precise. A nurse adjusted something nearby. The room smelled clean and faintly metallic. I tested my fingers, my breath, the way my head felt when I moved. Each check brought relief. And then something colder. Survival had been narrow. As clarity settled, the truth followed. The doctors explained the symptoms, the timeline, the cause. What entered my body was not an accident, not exhaustion, not stress. It was poison, measured, deliberate, chosen. The word landed without drama, and that scared me more than panic ever had. Anger rose, then steadied. I felt it move from my chest into my spine, turning into focus. I replayed the evening, the trust, the timing. I understood how close the plan came to working, and how much depended on what I did next. I stayed quiet. I listened. I let them believe confusion still held me. Silence became shelter, and patience became protection. I was awake now, fully, and I knew the danger clearly enough to choose my next step. I held the truth carefully, waiting for the moment when understanding would become leverage, and leverage would become safety again for me and anyone else he thought invisible still. I did not rush to confront him. I disappeared on purpose, letting silence do the work fear once tried to do. The instinct to shout, to accuse, to demand answers was strong, but instinct had nearly killed me. Staying quiet kept me alive. It also kept him careless. I let the story settle the way he expected it to, let him believe the absence meant success. While he relaxed, I watched. I listened. I learned how easily confidence grows when no one challenges it. Every step required discipline. I documented timelines, preserved records, and replayed details until memory sharpened into evidence. I measured my emotions the way he once measured poison, carefully and without display. Anger stayed contained, not denied, waiting for the right moment to matter. There is power in being underestimated. He thought grief had folded me inward. That shock had erased my voice. I allowed that illusion to stand because it gave me space to breathe and think. I was no longer reacting. I was arranging. Each quiet day tightened the structure around him, unseen but firm. By the time he reached out again, certain of his win, the path ahead of him was already set, and all he had to do was walk forward, unaware of what patience had built. I knew the next move would reveal everything he never imagined I survived to tell anyone. I watched him arrive with the ease of someone expecting a prize. His posture carried certainty, the kind that grows when silence has been mistaken for defeat. I stayed steady, breathing slow, letting the room do its work. Seeing him again did not ignite rage. It clarified everything. The fear that once shook me had been replaced by a clean, narrow focus. I was here. I was alive. And I did not need to announce it loudly for it to be true. The moment unfolded without spectacle. Authority stepped forward, calm and procedural, closing the space he assumed was safe. Papers appeared. Hands moved with practiced precision. The structure I had built quietly finally became visible. His confidence collapsed inward. I felt it register before it showed on his face, the recognition that the story he told himself could not survive facts. There was no shouting, no victory speech, no need for me to explain. Presence was enough. Survival was the answer. I noticed how small the room felt once control shifted, how ordinary everything looked when inevitability settled in. What he believed was a reward revealed itself as consequence, exact and irreversible. As I walked out, the weight lifted in a way anger never could. Justice did not rush, it advanced. I knew then that what followed would not belong to emotion or revenge, but to process, record, and law, unfolding patiently from that point forward. From there, the system took hold, measured and relentless, carrying consequences through courts and timelines that no longer depended on me alone now. I did not attend every hearing. I did not need to. The case moved forward on records, timelines, and tests that spoke without emotion. What mattered was that the story could be proven without me reliving it aloud. The evidence assembled itself patiently. Medical findings aligned with receipts, messages, and movements. Experts explained cause and intent in language designed to hold weight. Each step narrowed the space where denial could hide. When sentencing came, it arrived without drama. Power drained away through procedures, restrictions, and years measured by calendars rather than promises. What he lost was not just freedom, but the authority he believed he owned over my future. I watched from a distance, grounded and steady. There was no surge of triumph, no hunger to be seen. Accountability did not require my anger to function. It required consistency, documentation, and time. Closure did not feel loud. It felt clean. The outcome settled like a door finally closed, separating what happened from what comes next. I carried forward with my name intact, my work protected, and my life no longer paused by his shadow. With consequences set, attention turned outward again, toward repair, routine, and the quiet work of rebuilding a life that belonged to me. At last, I healed. I did not rebuild all at once. Life returned in measured pieces, guided by routine and choice rather than urgency. I focused first on stability, then on meaning. Healing was not a moment, but a practice I returned to daily. I learned where my boundaries actually were, not where I hoped they would be. I paid attention to discomfort instead of negotiating with it. Trust became something I extended carefully, beginning with myself. That shift changed everything. What happened did not define me, but it clarified me. I understood my strength more accurately, without exaggeration or doubt. I stopped confusing endurance with safety and politeness with peace. Awareness became a skill I respected, not a fear I avoided. My life now feels intentional again. Work, friendships, and quiet mornings carry weight because they are chosen. I no longer rush closeness or ignore warning signs for the sake of harmony. Calm has replaced chaos, not because the world is safer, but because I am clearer. Betrayal reshaped my standards, not my capacity for connection. I move forward grounded, alert, and whole, carrying lessons instead of scars. With that foundation restored, I was finally ready to speak outward, not to accuse, but to close this chapter honestly. What comes next is reflection shared carefully, shaped by survival, clarity, and responsibility with others. I have shared this story not to relive pain, but to honor what listening to myself made possible. Survival was not the ending. Clarity was. Justice mattered, but learning to trust my own awareness mattered more. What I carry now is quieter than fear and stronger than anger. I pay attention. I pause when something feels wrong. I protect my peace without apology. Those small choices rebuilt a life that feels honest and mine. If any part of this sounded familiar, I want you to know you are not alone or imagining it. Your instincts deserve respect. Warnings are often gentle before they are loud. Thank you for staying with me through something difficult and deeply personal. Being heard turned isolation into connection, and that matters more than I expected. If you feel ready, I invite you to share your own experience below. Your words might help someone else recognize themselves sooner and remind us that resilience grows when stories are told. Thank you for listening and holding space here.